Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Little Juju podcast. And you are now watching, hopefully, on JujuTube. And I'm very excited to have my auntie here today, my Aunt Myrtle. This is an interview I've been looking forward to and that I've been thinking about and I've been mentioning to her. So I'm glad that our schedules finally came together because my Aunt Myrtle is busy. So finally, our schedules came together and I get to share this interview of a family member of mine with you all. So I hope you enjoy. Hi, Aunt Myrtle.
Hi there. How are you, Sam?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. So, Aunt Myrtle, can you tell the people who you are? Who are you?
All right. You want me to talk about in relation to you?
Well, sure, that too. And your name, how old you are?
Okay. My name is Myrtle Stanley, and
Mhm.
I'm 91 years old as of last May.
Yeah.
And I lead a rather full life, although much of it is done from home because I'm often on the computer, on Zoom with my friends. I belong to a virtual senior center, and I teach a class on Zoom. And I'm just a busy person. I never have idle moments.
Mm-hmm. Anything
I'm
else?
a former I'm a former school teacher. I taught in the elementary schools of Baltimore for 25 years. I have done social work for the city of Baltimore. Did that for 5 years, and I also worked for the Archdiocese of Baltimore for 12 years. Those are some of the jobs that I held during my lifetime, and I spent a lot of years in school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You sure did. So you said that you were 91. So my Aunt Myrtle is related to me. She is my mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother's sister. So that is our relationship. And you are the middle child of three, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
Your mother was the youngest.
yes.
And our sister Burnetta, who passed a couple of years ago, was the oldest.
Mm-hmm.
We had a wonderful childhood.
Mm-hmm. And so, how I think about you, Aunt Myrtle, is that you were always just kind of like the great aunt that was fun. Like when I came over and when I was young, Aunt Myrtle, you would let me have coffee in the morning and we would stay up late and watch
we
TV
did, we did.
and we
I
played
said,
Scrabble.
hmm and these were things you couldn't do at home.
Right. Exactly. So, when
So
I
I
got,
was the, I guess I was the person who was allowing you to do some things that I knew you wanted to do and needed to do, and that they would be good for you. That
Mhm.
maybe your parents would have thought a little risky. 12
Like having coffee.
o'clock at night, we were sitting up in the bed eating popcorn and looking at what's the children's channel then?
The show I remember was Zoom. We were watching a show called Zoom, but I can't remember the channel that we were,
Hmm.
but it was whatever Zoom was on. Yep. So, and besides that, on Myrtle, I think you also was the person in my life that kind of consistently talked about ancestors, and you were the one that sort of taught me about storytelling. Like you always just had a story to tell, whether it was about our family or a story you made up or a play. Like you had us acting in plays. I remember being in a play with you. I was trying to think of it recently, but I
Yeah,
remember.
you were very young.
Mm-hmm.
It was the National Black Catholic Congress met here in
Yes.
Baltimore, and I was in charge of collecting a lot of plays, and I wrote some. And
Mm-hmm.
you were in one of the plays that I wrote, along with your mother
Mm-hmm.
and our sister Burnetta.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that. It was something about losing a penny or something about a penny.
Yeah, it was about a penny. It's a
Yes.
story from the Bible about the woman who lost a coin, and you
Yes.
all acted it out in a modern way, and it was really wonderful.
Yes. I remember that. So what is your religious identity? So what religion are you?
Well, I'm Roman Catholic,
Hmm.
but above all, I'm Christian.
Okay. And were you always Catholic? Were you raised
Oh
Catholic?
no. Oh, I've been through a series. I was
Okay.
raised Baptist. Your grandparents were Baptist, their parents were Baptist, and I grew up Baptist until I got married. When I got married, my husband was a long time, lifetime member of an East Baltimore Methodist church.
Okay.
And so I felt that it was better for me to go where he was and his family was to bring our children up rather than try to go back to where I had been or locate a new church. So I went there and became Methodist. And then after we were there for several years, we both became sort of disenchanted with that church. I don't know, it wasn't exactly what we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And then a new church opened across the street from where I lived. It was a Lutheran church. We both joined it and we stayed there until things became a little difficult there. And I just found it difficult to go to that church because there was a lot of infighting, and that wasn't what I thought church was about.
Mm-hmm.
So my son Jonathan went to Catholics, changed over from public to Catholic school because the Catholic schools were on shift, and the principal did not want to move him to a morning shift from afternoon, which I wanted to do because I was working. I wanted to see if he got to school, and my niece would pick him up and keep him until I got home. He was in the fourth grade, and her children went to that school also. In the meantime, the principal did not want to move him to the morning shift. And he said, I got my numbers right. So I said to myself, my child is not a number. I don't know what I'm going to do, but he's not going to go to school here. So a dear friend of mine lived across the street, and she had a son about the age of my son, Jonathan. And he went to St. Anne's School. She said, well, you don't have to worry with that. He can go to St. Anne's School because sister will be glad to have him. She called sister up on a Sunday night, and sister said, bring him to school tomorrow. And I did. And from then on, he was in the Catholic school. And then he said to us, at that time, the Catholic children went to Mass every day or almost every day. He said, I like Mass. You should come sometimes. So then I started going on Sundays, and I really liked the church. I liked the people. I liked the way they served. And the next thing I knew, his father and I, my husband and I, were joining the Catholic Church. I'm staying here. I'm not leaving now. This is the last time I'm making a change like this because there's no perfect church.
Mm-hmm.
And I like so many things here that
Mm-hmm.
I will stay. And I did. And that was when I was around 40, and now I'm 91. So I've been Catholic for quite a few years.
That's a long time. And it's interesting. I didn't know that you come from a Baptist family and that was a long lineage of Baptist
Oh, yeah.
family members. I had no idea of that. It kind of reminds me of my own story, which I don't think you know, but having been through just different religions or leaving different churches or being, because I've done that same thing. I started with Catholic and then I started going to Baptist church actually, which is
Hmm.
interesting to me. I started going to New Psalmist, and then I started going to different churches, and then completely having left. So
What happened? It turned dark.
it turned dark.
Hmm.
Oh, your screen.
On my screen, I can't see anything. It
Oh,
got
maybe I
dark.
have to move the.
Oh, I've got, yes, I have it back now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just thought that that was interesting. So thank you for sharing that. I'm curious how the energy of like ancestors and storytelling, where did that come from? Why did you think that that was important to share with the family and share with me?
Well, it was important because my mother shared it with me. When we were small, my mother was a great storyteller. And she would, before we went to bed at night, she would tell us stories. She could pop out a story anytime for any occasion. And always at bedtime, and sometimes we'd say, tell us one more story. She told us some stories that were family stories. She told us some stories that were traditional. She told us some stories like, was it Uncle Wiggly and various characters who were known then.
Uncle
Uh,
Wiggly, you said?
Uncle Wiggly. There was a character named Uncle Wiggly. He was a rabbit, and he had a lot of adventures. And the stories used to appear in the newspaper. And she knew some other under Uncle Wiggly stories that we didn't read about, and she told us about him.
Mm.
And Uncle Wiggly had quite a few adventures with other animals. It was all animal characters.
It sounds like
She
Brer Rabbit or something like that.
Yeah, it was like Brer Rabbit. Brer
Mm-hmm.
Rabbit is, I think, traditionally black. And
Mm-hmm.
then we had, what's the other stories? Oh, Brer Rabbit, I guess, was one of the main ones
Mm-hmm.
that she also told us about Brer Rabbit and about the animals and the things that they did. And Aesop's fables.
Okay.
And so through all of that, we learned a lot about how things were, but we always enjoyed listening to the stories. And so we would beg her for more stories. And she said, you got to go to bed now. This is the last story. And that would be my sister Burnetta and my sister Ruth, who is your grandmother, and myself. And we would listen to these stories the last thing before we went to bed. There were two things that my mother always did, and that was she told stories and she sang hymns.
Mm-hmm.
She sang hymns when she was making cakes. She sang hymns when she was scrubbing the floor. She sang hymns when she was washing clothes. By the time I went to school, I think I knew most of the hymns in the Baptist hymnal because
Mm-hmm.
she sang them and she sang every verse.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's so I'm getting emotional because I haven't heard these things before, so I didn't know.
You probably haven't, and that's the way she worked. And
Mm-hmm.
she was a deeply spiritual woman,
Mm-hmm.
and she never worried about anything because she always considered herself in the hands of God. But she brought three lines of tradition from her ancestors to us, and all of them involve pretty much the same storytelling aspect.
Hmm.
She described the first members that she knew of her family as a woman who came from England whose name was Polly Hearn. And Polly Hearn fell in love with a Native American, and he fell in love with her. And so, as unusual as it was, they married and had three daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a problem at that time because at that time, women didn't own property. Property always belonged to the man. In her tradition, in his tradition, in Indian tradition, women could own the property, run everything, and the men didn't bother about it. But in the European tradition, men were in charge, as you know, about everything. And so they had three daughters, and they began to worry about what would happen to these three daughters if they didn't marry, because they had to have a husband to take care of their share of whatever estate the parents left behind when they died. And so they had a difficult time because the European men did not want these women whom their father was half Native American and half English. They
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't. They didn't want to date them. They didn't want anything to do with them. And the Native Americans really didn't care too much for these women who were half European. They treated them more or less like they might always just be old maids.
Mm-hmm.
And so Polly Hearn and her husband, whose name was Tom, I know nothing else of him because I don't know if they had last names. But she and Tom decided that they would go down to a nearby plantation and look over some of the slaves and see if they could find some responsible men that they would like to have for sons in law. Because both of them realized that being a slave did not stop a person from being a responsible person. It did not stop them from being intelligent. It did not stop them from being caring. And so they went down and they found three men. And each of the men they interviewed like you're interviewing me today. And they said to them, if you would marry my daughter, we would buy your freedom. Would you like to do that? Now, can you imagine a slave giving up an opportunity to be free? So the
Wow.
three men married the three girls. So therefore, that was where the blood from Europe, Native American, and African all came together in their children. And there are a number of layers of that go on in various times, different ones in the family, married in either race, any group, the
So
ones they wanted.
the so Polly Hearn and Tom had children who had your mother.
No, it was further down than that because
Oh,
this
it
was
was way further.
like in the 1700s.
Oh,
My
oh,
mother
okay.
was born in the late 1800s,
Oh, I
so she
see.
didn't know them.
Okay,
She
this is
only
a
she knew
story that she
that's
knew.
the oral tradition that the families passed on.
Oh, I see.
And my mother's mother's mother died when she was seven. When my mother's mother was 17. She
Okay.
had three brothers, and when they kind of took over when their mother died, trying to help her to plan her life and to get her established.
Okay.
But they were all mixed.
Mhm.
Their mother was of the the races I just talked about, but their father was Caucasian,
Hmm.
and they owned land and had education and lived pretty well. I don't know how that community must have been at that time because I know the people didn't normally mix. They didn't really legally marry, but their
Right.
father took care of them, gave them property, knew them, and visited them. And my mother says that she remembers when her mother's father used to come to their place, their farm where they lived, but he never talked to them. He was their grandfather, but he knew they were his grandchildren.
And he was a white person.
He was a white man,
Mhm.
and he had a white family.
Oh,
I
so
was
he
there.
would come and visit your mother, but he never talked to them. But he did acknowledge,
Mm.
he knew that they were his
It was his
grandchildren.
children, and in fact, they had property uh, that he left to my mother's mother, which
Mm.
eventually went to my mother and her brothers.
Oh wow. So that's
Couple,
some of the land in Virginia?
that's the land in Virginia where they live. Some relatives live now,
Right.
and it's some land that nobody. I don't know if they live on it now, but it used to be like a wooded area.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was young, maybe I was about 23, 24 years old. My mother and her brothers sold trees off that land. I mean, the family
Right.
benefited from it throughout my lifetime.
Right.
And right now, there are places I can go and say, I'm a part owner of this because of what he did.
Right. Ooh, that's wow.
That's a story, isn't it?
That's a I mean it's multi-layered and complex too. I mean it's just a
It
lot of
really is.
it's just a lot of things happening at one time.
And when you look at people, you don't know what their background is.
Right.
I just happen to know mine because they kept it alive by oral tradition
By oral
because
tradition.
that's what Indians do. It's what Africans do. And I guess these people from Europe did it because records weren't really that good at that time.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's something I talk about on the podcast a lot is my, of course, love for storytelling. I tell stories sometimes on this platform as well. But really, I talk about the importance of talking to family members and our elders to be able to gain these stories because they're so
Yeah, because
important. And we don't have
that's
written
so much.
documents.
No, we don't. We don't have documents. Like I don't have documents about any of those things. It's
Right.
only that they were told over and over again, just like the Bible is oral tradition, especially the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that everybody saw those things, but they were so sure it was their story. And it was so important that they told it
Mm.
over and over again. And this is the way it was. The parents told it to the children. They told it until they knew it well. And then it came on down to generations. And my mother told us, so we knew from whence we had come.
Right. And then I get to tell my kids
And
when
you
I
get
have
to
some
tell
kids.
your kids when you have them where
Yes.
the family came from. And
Yes.
you know that you are a product of three continents.
Mm-hmm.
Not many people can really point that out in a way, the same way that I can, and
Right.
that you will be able to.
Right. Um, so I want to switch gears just a little bit. It's related, but
Mm,
I know that when I was born, I had a naming ceremony. I had an African naming ceremony,
yes, you did.
and it was in the house I grew up in West Baltimore in the basement. I was just looking at pictures of it, and you facilitated that ceremony.
I did. Oh, I was so happy to have that for you.
Can you talk
And
about
so,
what you remember about the ceremony? Because I really don't know much about it besides the pictures that were there in my
all
name.
right, well, I guess not. Well, what really happened was we invited all the family, both sides, every side, not just both sides, every side. And you were baptized as a Catholic, as an
Mm-hmm.
infant in the church. And following the church, we went to your house. And there we had the naming ceremony. I don't know if I have any copies of that now, but everybody had a copy of it at the time. And we talked about what your name meant and why you were named, where your name had come from,
Mm-hmm.
and what we hope for you in your life and the gifts. And everybody had the opportunity to wish a gift for you. So that's why you're so multi-talented because everybody put all the gifts on you.
Yeah.
Your father's people, your mother's people, your grandfather, David's family,
Mm-hmm.
your aunt, I can't remember her name now, the one who's a nurse.
Oh, Aunt Zena.
No, well, Aunt Zena, but I mean your father's sister,
My father. That's Aunt Zena.
Sadie, Aunt
Oh,
Sadie.
Pop Pop's
I'm
sister.
saying your father, your grandfather's sister.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, she was there. Her daughter was there. There were a lot of people who were there, and we sang songs, we prayed. Oh, we did a lot of things. We said, "Want this baby to have a good life."
I
And I
love
remember
that.
I had a blanket that I had. It wasn't exactly made for you, but it was designed for you. It was a white baby's blanket that was used for your christening. And I had some kente cloth, and I had a friend of mine who was a seamstress to trim it all around the edges in kente cloth. I don't know if anybody knows where that blanket is now, but I wanted you to have that. And I wanted you to be proud of your African ancestry. That was something in our family. My mother always reminded us, I mean, although she told us what all the people who were in our past. She knew that the life we lived was as African Americans, and she wanted us to be proud of who we are. In
Mhm.
my home, when I grew up, there were three books that you had to know and you had to read. One was the Holy Bible.
Mhm.
Second was The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass.
Mm.
And the third was Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington. And my mother had acquired these books years and years and years ago. I think she may have had a chance to hear Frederick Douglass speak. She may have gotten the book at one of his speeches. I don't know. But these books, I mean, they were in the house and they were used until they got ragged.
Mhm.
And it was the fact that, you know, there would be obstacles to face. There would be times when you couldn't do what you wanted to do, but there was always a lot that you could do. And what you
Mm.
needed to do was do everything that you could do. So my
Mm.
mother was involved in voter registration. She was involved with the Provident Hospital, which no longer exists. They always needed money, and she was always selling tickets or doing something to help to raise money for Provident. And the Afro American newspaper came to our house every week, 2 times a week.
Mm.
Now it comes out once a week. And we could read in there about ourselves because the local papers, we had the Sun and the News American, but they very seldom mention us except
Right.
when somebody committed a crime,
Mhm.
and they would put in there that you were black, that this person was black, and they did something terrible.
Mhm.
Whereas the Afro honored the achievements of the black people. So that's how I got to know a lot about my own people.
Mm.
Now, at that time in the history in our community, we had what we call Negro History Week.
Oh
And it
yeah,
was one
before
week
Black
out of
History
the
Month.
year before Black History Month. So it was one week out of the year when there were a lot of activities in the schools, which not only were predominantly black, they were all black because Baltimore schools were segregated.
Still
When
are.
our teachers educated us about people, and I learned about Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, Mary McLeod Bethune, I was so proud of those people as if I knew them.
Oh.
And Mary McLeod Bethune was mentor, although I never knew her in life, because she was a woman who was born a slave. And when she got her freedom, she learned how to read, and she said everybody else needed to do it.
Mhm.
And there's a story of how she started a school in an old garage with broken furniture and torn books to educate her own people. And eventually, she worked with the level where she founded a school, which is now Bethune Cookman College.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Wow.
So it took a lot of people with a lot of nerve. Frederick Douglass was marvelous. Born a slave in Maryland, and they had Frederick Douglass Day here just a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
And he escaped slavery, came to Baltimore, where he worked on ships, and he lived in a home with the family because his master rented him out to somebody
Right.
and would earn money by letting him do that. Frederick Douglass didn't get paid, his master got paid. But he lived there, and the woman was very concerned about him, and she saw how bright he was, and she started to teach him to read until her husband found out about it. And then she had to stop. But he would go out on the street. And just to show you how people can be so determined to learn, he would say to little boys, these were Caucasian boys playing, I bet you don't know how to spell dog. And this old dog is D-O-G. That's how you learn how to spell dog. I bet
Mm.
you don't know how to spell this. And he also would have pieces of bread or cookies or something to eat in his pocket, and he would reward them for spelling the words for him. And that, I mean, by the time the man was grown, he had what was equivalent to a college education.
Right.
If you've seen any of his books, people didn't, when he went around speaking about abolition and ending of slavery, went to England and various places in this country, people that couldn't believe that he was a slave. He
Right.
was that well educated. He ended up being an ambassador for the United States, I think to Haiti. Haiti.
Hmm.
He was an ambassador. He
Wow.
lived in the Washington area and had a fine home. And one of the things that he did that made some people angry was his second wife was
Now she
Caucasian.
was. Uh huh. I know. That's something people bring up
Yeah,
typically.
they bring that up. Why do you do that?
Uh huh.
But it really was due to the fact that he associated in all circles. And he
Mm.
didn't look upon himself as a black man or as an African American. He looked on himself as a man. And
Mm.
because of his accomplishments, that's how they looked at him.
Mm. Right. they kind of put aside the racial aspect was sort of secondary
Mm,
once he reached a certain level of prominence or fame
yeah,
in the community.
right.
Right. Hmm. Okay. Well, aren't you just a walking? See, this is why I love talking to you on Myrtle. You just a walking bowl of information. So
Yeah, well, I know a lot. I know a lot about Americans, and especially African Americans.
So I want to then now kind of transition into something right now that I celebrate. Is called Hoodoo Heritage Month, and it's in October. And I wanted
Mm.
to talk a little bit about hoodoo with you and voodoo, and see if you were familiar with that term. And if so, if not, that's okay. We can talk about it. But if so, I just want to know kind of what comes to your mind when I say the words hoodoo. If you're familiar with that.
All I know is I associated with West Indians.
Oh,
People in the West
interesting.
Indies. I didn't know about much about it in this country, although I'm
Oh,
sure
in the
it
West
exists.
Indies. Oh, okay.
The West Indies,
Oh, okay,
the
okay.
Africans who settled in the West Indies and in
Oh,
Cuba.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So basically hoodoo is sort of this something that I think that you probably have engaged in and our family has. We just may not have called it hoodoo, but it's the storytelling, it's the carrying of oral traditions, from Africa, from our ancestry. It's also the use of herbs and roots, and prayers to be able to create a reality. So, if anyone has ever given you a specific type of herb to take for your stomach, or a certain kind of plant that you were supposed to use to help with a variety of
Mhm.
different things, whether they be spiritual or medicinal, that's sort of part of the lineage of hoodoo. And
All
so,
right, I wanted to tell you before we get away from it. My grandmother, my
mhm,
mother's mother,
mhm.
was a midwife and a nurse of her time in
Wow,
Matthews, Virginia, and she took care of
wow,
most of the sick people. She was there for the birth of most of the babies, and she had an herb garden, and she knew how to use
wow,
herbs. And when people were sick,
wow.
they would sometimes go to the doctor, who was a Caucasian doctor, who's willing to take care of them. But he'd tell them a lot of them, oh, let's go see Mary Liza. That was my grandmother's
What
name.
was her name?
And so they looked to her. Her name was Mary Elizabeth, but they called her Mary Liza, Mary
Okay.
Eliza.
Hmm.
Her name was Hearn, because she had that same name from Europe, um, before she got married, and then she married Robinson.
Wow. Okay. So that is also in the legacy of hoodoo midwives, people who had the herbal gardens, who they would go to, like you
Mhm.
said, to the doctor would go say, go see Merliza. She was
Mhm.
probably the local caretaker, healer
She
for.
really was. She was there when most of the babies were born. She was there. Everybody knew about it.
Wow.
Women would get sick, or they'd say, "I don't know what's wrong. I got to see Mary Liza," and they would just as soon go to her as to go to the doctor. And she usually could tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure she learned this from her ancestors, not by going to
Exactly.
school, but from her ancestors.
Right. And so
And a
that's
lot of it came from Africa as well as from the Native American side.
that's a lot of what my work is centered around, talking about this. And so I'm happy we get to talk that, or I get to at least feel connected to an ancestor of mine who did this work in a different way. Obviously, we're
Yeah,
different now, but I'm like, oh, wow, this isn't something that I'm so far removed from. This is actually something that
because
was
she's
put
your
together.
great great grandmother.
Right, right. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that she did that
You
particular work.
probably never really told that. That's right.
Right. And so I think a lot of us, especially young people, we're trying to embrace these traditions, embrace, what people call quote unquote alternative medicines.
Mhm.
And we don't always know how to do that because our it's like we feel like our ancestors or elders don't talk about it, but maybe it just wasn't a thing to go on and share, or it was just what you did. It wasn't necessarily something that was broadcasted.
Right, because now I realize when I was a little girl, if I had known what I know now, I
Hmm.
would have talked my grandmother's ears off. I would
Right,
have questioned her to all degrees because I probably would know a lot of things that I don't know
right,
because she never discussed them with me and I never asked her.
right.
We went to the doctor, you
Hmm.
know,
Right,
in Baltimore, and yet she knew a lot. She knew a lot.
right, right.
I
And
think she even told stories. I mean, some of them would seem strange to us. One time there was a man who injured his foot and became infected, and they thought sure they were not going to have to cut it off. They healed his foot by putting his foot in a box and burying it in the dirt. Now, I don't know what it was that came out of that dirt, worms, whatever came out. They ate off the infection, and he saved his foot.
And where did who told you this story?
This happened in Virginia. My mother told me that her mother knew about it.
Wow.
It may have happened during my mother's lifetime. I don't know.
Wow. So that is what we would classify as hoodoo. Something that is,
Oh, I see.
yes.
Because that would seem strange. Who today would want to bury their foot in dirt? But it saved his foot.
Right. Right. That's power. That is powerful. And so I want to just talk to you and just tell you a little bit about what it is that I do and just get your thoughts and feelings on it because, I
Mm,
think I've shared a little bit with you that I don't necessarily identify with being Christian anymore, although I still feel connected to the Catholic Church and feel like a lot of what I do now is rooted in ways that I learned how to pray, from you,
mm,
from the Oblate Sisters, which is a black convent here in Baltimore.
mm,
Just what I learned, working with and praying to Mary, for example, and not
mm.
just Jesus. So there was always other saints that I knew how to petition or talk to because
And
of.
see, that's the thing that's true about Catholics, that a
Mhm.
lot of Protestants have a lot of question about it. But if you talk about people of other cultures, they know that the people who went before us are still concerned about us
Yes.
because they did what they did to make a way for us.
Right. Right, exactly. And so I still try to be in communication with them, the
Mm,
creator as well, or God, but
yeah.
also like I recognize that our ancestors are still very present in what is going on in our lives. And I want to know
Oh,
what
they
they
are.
have to say. And I want to know their advices. So I've had dreams, about our ancestors. I can hear them sometimes, and sometimes I can talk to them. And so people have come to me. I don't do it right now, but there was a time where people were coming to me and getting readings. And I would basically be able to see and hear other people's ancestors. And I would say, oh, this person looks like this, or this person saying her name is Mary. And they're like, oh, that's my great grandmother. I'm like, okay, well, she said you need to do this, that, and the third. And so I have been just trying to be more open about that with my family. And I wanted to share it with you, and especially
Yeah,
with
because I
the
think your family needs that particular blessing. We need to be able to talk about those things. Just like right now. I mean, I talk to my mother and my father, who have been dead for quite a while, because I know they will never stop loving me.
right.
And I have to tell them daily how much I love them and how much I thank them for all that they did for me. And I know that when I'm in trouble, I know they talk to the Lord about it. I know
Right.
where they are. They were good, good people. And I know that they're resting in what we call heaven.
Mm-hmm. I love
And
that.
and we are closer to it too. You're probably closer to it with your Aunt Burnetta, who lived in
Mm-hmm.
your house for a while.
Yes,
She cannot go away simply because she died. She is there.
she
She
is.
is there.
She is. She definitely is. I talk to Aunt Burnetta occasionally, especially when
Mhm.
I need advice on relationship stuff.
Oh, she's the one. She's the one.
Because she knew. She
She
definitely.
knew. She really knew. We said, it's amazing. I look at some pictures of her now. When you're growing up with your sisters, you don't necessarily think that she was 7 years older than I am. So I felt like when I was 9, she was 16. She was grown. She wasn't, but I thought so. But she got married when she was 15. But
Mhm.
anyway, I looked at her, and then when I look back over those pictures, physically, she was beautiful. She
Mhm.
really was. And I guess that's what attracted all the men because she got married 5 times. I
Aunt
remember
Bernard
I remember at her funeral, your mother said, and she married, and she married, and she married.
and
She
married
said
and
that,
married.
yeah, if she felt that she wanted to share her life with somebody, she couldn't just do it with that marriage. So she did legally and through marriage.
She sure did. One thing
Mm.
about Aunt Bernetta, she kept a man.
She did. When she married her last husband, she was in her early 80s, and he was
Hmm.
in his 60s.
Sure was.
And he called her, what did he call her? Oh, he had a name for her. It was a real sweet name. Anyhow, I'll think of it later on.
Hmm.
But baby. And
Hmm.
so the people didn't know her name. They called her Miss Baby. Because he
Oh.
always calls her baby. So and so's a baby, baby. He loved her to pieces. He died before she did.
Hmm.
And I thought she was going to get married again, but she didn't.
Hmm. Hmm. So do you ever still talk to Aunt Burnetta?
Yeah,
You do. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I do. I talk to people that I know who are gone. I talk to my husband, your Uncle Theodore. I talk to your cousin, Theodora,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
other people too. The other
Mm-hmm.
day I was talking to one of my sisters-in-law, Nellie. I mean, I talk to them because I know they know the whole truth now.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I contact them because they inspire me.
Do you ever feel like you feel their answers, or you kind of feel that they're listening, or kind of get
Oh, I
response?
feel that they do. I feel
Mm-hmm.
that they do. I
Mm-hmm.
feel that they really listen. I'm sure they're listening sometimes when I'm even unaware of it.
Oh yeah, they're probably listening to this conversation.
And I don't want to think anybody think that I am out of my mind or something, but there are times I feel that they touch me, like on my shoulder. That's
Mm-hmm.
why somebody's trying to get in touch with me.
Listen, nobody watching this will think you out of your mind, because my whole show is about things just like this and
Yeah,
my
it's
own
real.
experiences. It is
It's
real.
real, and people don't. That's why they live so much in the here and now, because they don't understand the importance of the past, and that between life and death, there's just a thin veil.
Mm-hmm.
We can't transpire it right now, but it's a thin veil.
Right.
And I would think that while nobody who's passed on would want to come back here to stay, because it's so much better where they are if
Mm-hmm.
they've lived the right life,
Mm-hmm.
but their interests are here. We are here.
Right. Right. What advice would you have to young people watching, or just whoever's watching, who wants to kind of connect with their family around these kinds of things, or if they have experiences and dreams but they're afraid that, maybe they come from a Christian background or whatever type of Abrahamic religion, so they feel like they can't talk about these things. Would you have any advice for people in how to talk to their family or elders who they might be afraid may not understand?
Well, I think so. I think they should ask questions and get
Mhm,
information.
mhm,
And then they should also say, if they have feelings about something, express it and not be afraid to. Early Christians were not afraid. The Israeli or have never been afraid of that. It's only recently
mhm.
that people have gotten a place where they think that that's ignorant or it doesn't have any place, there's no truth to it.
Right.
When you start throwing truth away, you may end up with nothing.
Mm. Good point.
Truth is the truth.
Right. 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 Um,
And
mhm.
it's what keeps us going, really.
Right. That's true. That's the truth. And
And if people get themselves right with that, they will be like I am at 91 years of age. I have no fear. If I should go in my room tonight or go in my room 5 minutes from now and drop dead, I don't want people to say, oh, poor Myrtle. Say, glory, hallelujah, she made it in,
mhm,
because that's the aim of my life.
mhm,
Not to leave here to go to something bad, but when I leave here to go to something even better that
mhm.
I have been dreaming about and working on and planning for all of my life.
Right. Right.
And life does not end with the grave.
It doesn't. It's a new life begins, really.
That's where new life begins.
Mhm.
And therefore, we need to really celebrate our ancestors and I think they're in a position where they can do us good. For a long time, as a Roman Catholic, I wasn't too much into saints. I mean, I knew all about them,
Mhm.
and I admired their lives and the things that they did, but I didn't think that they had too much relation to me.
Mm.
After my father died, and I think you knew him, you don't remember him probably, but you were very little
He
when he
might have
died.
passed before I was born, but I don't remember. I don't.
I'm trying to think.
What
Oh, I
year? Do you
remember.
remember what year?
No, maybe because it was your mother, probably.
Yeah.
Because I
Mhm.
remember one day we were talking, and it was when your mother was little,
Yeah.
and she said she spelled her name, and she spelled Brooks,
Mhm.
which was my maiden name, my father's name. And he always liked to teach the children. And he was teaching her to spell Brooks, although her name was young, because I guess he wasn't really thinking at the time
Right.
that while she was a Brooks, it wasn't her legal name or last name. But anyway, he I'm saying he hadn't been dead long. And one of the children, it was Jonathan, was having some kind of a problem. Now, it was so small, I don't know what it was, but it was bothering me to my depth. And I said, Daddy, will you please talk to Jesus about this? And then I knew the real meaning of the ancestors and prayer to those who've gone before. And I have
Mm,
never been afraid of it since
mm,
because I
mm-hmm.
did get an answer.
Right, right.
I know he did talk to Jesus because the problem resolved itself.
Mm,
Or
mm-hmm.
it was resolved, I'll say.
Right,
It didn't resolve itself. It was
right,
resolved.
right, right. That's wonderful, Aunt Myrtle. I've really enjoyed this. Oh, I will also just want to ask before we close out, do you just have any advice for us in general? We are just going through a lot right now in the world. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's also just been a lot of uprisings in regards to Black lives. I mean, there's just so many different things that are going on, and you've witnessed different moments of upheaval and kind of
Hmm.
chaos within your life, obviously, since you've been alive for 91 years. So as somebody who has seen those kinds of things, what sort of advice or just kind of information would you want people to know that you can share with us to uplift us at this time?
All right. There's a verse in scripture, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
The end and the pandemic, the racial uprisings, any of the stuff that's going on, it's not going to last. It's here for a reason. All of them came about because of something that people did. And God is giving people the chance to figure out how to handle it. Because just like with a baby learning to walk, if you keep carrying it around, it will never walk. You have to let the baby walk, let the baby fall, learn how to get up, and then start again. And soon one day he isn't falling so much. And that's my philosophy about
Mm-hmm.
life. And I feel that what we need to do is just do the best we can wherever we are. Try not to live with a lot of regrets. Try not to let feelings of anger control us.
Mm.
I have that. You sent me a video.
I
Did you
did.
know? Somebody sent me a video of you on Charles Street.
Oh, yes,
Ain't
I
gonna
did
let
send you
nobody
that.
turn me around. Yeah,
Yes, I was
I
sending.
play that almost daily because
Oh,
I'm so happy about it. I know not your grandmother, your mother's. It was your mother's mother. Yeah, your mother's
a
mother.
great grandmother.
Your great grandmother
Your
was
mother.
yeah, my mother was a woman who wanted to see things be resolved peacefully and that everybody should be treated like a person with dignity.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when we were growing up, the only hospital we ever went to was Providence because it was run by black people.
Mm-hmm.
The only doctors we ever went to were black because my mother had faith in black people that
Mm.
they could take care of themselves, that they had abilities, and while when other people tried to prevent us from making progress, we're going to make it anyhow.
Yes.
With almost nothing, we started colleges, universities, medical schools, all kinds of Fisk, uh, Howard University, with some help from some Indian money or something. But nevertheless, if black people hadn't stuck with it, it wouldn't have been.
Right.
And she always believed that one day it was going to be resolved and that one day things would be fair. We had a lot of hope during the civil rights movement in the 50s, but seems like we've gone backwards in some ways. And there are groups that are coming up with such hatred against people who are just black for being black. Like we're
Mm-hmm.
going to take something from them or that they're going to lose something if we have the same opportunity that they have. We're not out to take anything from anybody. And I said one time, I said, I know why they're afraid. If you put your foot on somebody's neck and they get up anyhow, that's a person to be afraid of.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what it's really about because
Mm-hmm.
we should never be filling the positions we fill. No one who is of African descent should have ever been president of the United States.
They
These
should be alive.
schools, these jobs, all
Mm-hmm.
these things that are going on. When somebody's trying to push you down and you can push up through that, you got to be strong. I'm proud of being black. Oh, I'm so proud of being black. Wouldn't want to be anything else.
Nope.
Even though other people have many, many advantages, they don't have the one advantage that I have, and that is I come from a strong line of people
Mm-hmm.
who will handle the circumstances, even if it's difficult.
Yes. Yes. And so we will. We will, because we
We
already.
will. We will come through. We don't need to be afraid. We
Mm,
need to try to do right. We have a right to protest if we want, to march and to sing. The law of the United States says that we can, and we don't need to back down. A few of us are going to be hurt pretty badly. Some
mm,
people will even die. But
mm,
you know, that's how it is. If we're doing, I feel that for all the people who've died in the struggle, Martin Luther King and all the rest of them, they are marching around heaven singing hallelujah, just waiting for us to come on up.
mm,
And I just believe that in all of my heart. I don't think they're ever sorry for what they did. Uh, I think about women like Harriet Tubman.
mm-hmm,
That woman was a whirlwind. I went to her grave in Canada, and I went to her home there that she had. And it just brought tears to my eyes to think how this woman was beaten so severely that she had seizures and fits, and yet she could lead hundreds of people out of slavery into freedom, all the way from Baltimore, from Maryland, and even further south, all the way from Maryland, all the way up to Canada, and help them establish a new life.
mm,
And they didn't have horses and they didn't have wagons. Sometimes they were given rides,
mm.
but a lot of it was done on foot
Right.
with horses and dogs coming behind them.
Right. Right. So we come from that legacy.
You really do so. I feel strong. I don't think there's anything that's going to carry me down.
Mm, mm-hmm,
And I feel that one of my jobs right now is to speak up when I need to speak up. I belong to a multicultural, multiracial virtual senior center. And these some of those people, I don't know where they've been for the last 100 years. I have to keep telling them what we have come through. And I think they're frightened. I guess if I had mistreated people or my ancestors had mistreated them, I would feel that if they ever got on top, they'd treat me like a dog. That's not the nature of the African American. We're not out to hurt anybody. We just want the same thing that everybody else has. You have ancestors who fought in the Civil War, in the Spanish American War, in World War II, World War One. My father was a veteran of World War One. My husband was a veteran of World War II. I mean, we've been fighting since the day we've been here. Isn't it our country? Don't we have the right to whatever the Constitution says people? We know it wasn't meant when it was written that we would ever have anything. It was always believed that
right.
we'd be three-fifths of a person, and the only use we would have is that our master could vote counting us as two-thirds of people, so that how more people they had, the more votes they could cast, which was
Mm-hmm,
really horrible.
mm-hmm,
But that's over now, and nobody's ever going back to it. And I think people are so strong today that if they speak out and they're isolated, alienated, like you sang in that song, ain't no jailhouse going to turn me back.
mm-hmm,
You got to believe that in your heart,
mm-hmm,
that you are doing what God wants you to do. And when you get a chance to enlighten somebody about what African Americans have done or been through, you'll do it because they didn't have Negro History Week like I had when I was a child, and they always thought we were just good for scrubbing floors and cooking food and taking care of babies.
mm-hmm.
And it shows you how ridiculous people have been
Right. 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 You're right, Myrtle. We come from a legacy of strong people who have accomplished a lot with very little. So even
with
in this
very little.
moment, we have a lot more than what our ancestors had. So I believe the
Mhm.
same thing that we are going to persevere and we are going to be victorious. I mean, I think that
We
we
are.
already are in so many ways. So I appreciate you so much, Myrtle. There were so many moments I felt like breaking out into tears because of what you're talking about. I mean, it's so this is the work that I live for. You know,
Yeah, I know you do.
this is so important to me. And I know that our interview today will bring some light and some love and some inspiration to a lot of people. So I'm just so excited to share this. And I'm just so excited that you are my auntie. I'm so blessed to come from such a
I'm
wonderful
so
family.
blessed to have you, and I just hope that someday maybe we can sit down face to face with some group somewhere and
Yes,
talk and give people the chance to ask questions,
I
to
would love
express
that.
or tell their stories, because
Yes.
people will have to tell their story before they're going to really identify with it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
people probably know more than they've ever spoken of.
Yes, they do. They do. They do. It's a lot in the story, and we have a lot as people. We got a lot of stories to tell. So thank you so much, Aunt Myrtle. I'm
Well,
gonna,
thank you for giving me the privilege of speaking.
of course, and I'm gonna update you with everything and the feedback and whatever messages people have for you, because I know people are gonna have some messages for you. So thank you so much. I'll
Thank
talk.
you so much, Sam. And if you can send me a copy of
Of
the
course,
interview, I'd appreciate it.
I definitely will.
This has been my pleasure. I remember when you were born. When you were born, I was in Louisiana at a
Hmm.
National Black Catholic Congress,
Hmm.
and your mother called me up to tell me that the baby is here.
Hmm.
And when they gave me, I had an early picture of you, and I don't know what happened to it. I don't know whether I gave it to your mother or what I did with it. But
Hmm.
there was a picture of you, and you were newborn, and your eyes were open wide, like you were looking around to see what you could see. And Jonathan used to look at your mother when she was a baby. He was 7 when she was born. He said, if she keeps looking around like that and listening, she's going to learn a lot. So that's our family. We're always anxious to learn. I said for
Hmm.
myself, if the day comes that I'm not learning anything new, I will be dead.
Mm,
Because as long as there's something that I don't know, I'm going to be curious about it.
right.
And I also like to share the things that I know because I know a lot of people don't know some things that I know.
Right. And we love you for that. That's why we love Aunt Myrtle. That's
Mhm.
why y'all
Yeah,
family.
well, you used to come. We used to be buddies. I remember one time I took, no, I think it was your mother. I took your mother to the beach.
Oh yes, my
And
mother tells me that story though about when you took her to the beach. She still talks about that and how important that was. Because Grandma
yeah,
wasn't gonna take her to the beach. So she
uh,
she said, I said, Grandma Ruth wasn't gonna take her to
no,
the beach.
no.
So she tells me that story too. Like, yep, Aunt Myrtle's the one that would take me to the beach when I wanted to go to the water. We love you.
Yeah, I did certain things in the family that I was a little bit different. I remember, you remember, this is your cousin, Dimps, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he was little, I used to come to us all the time because it was walking distance from my house. And the family was on Woodburn Avenue then.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to walk up to Woodburn Avenue, and Dimps, when I got there, Dimps was waiting for me to play with him. And I
Oh.
would sit on the floor and play games with him and talk to him and tell him stories, just like Mama did. And then when one day Burnetta went over, and he said, "Come on, floor and play with me." So Burnett said, "I don't know if I can get down on the floor." He said, "Aunt Myrtle gets down on the floor."
So why
So
can't
she
you?
got
Aunt
on.
Myrtle gets
Oh,
on
I can't. What are you trying to talk about? So she got down on the floor too. And no matter wherever I go, I always choose to spend some time with the little people
the floor. Mm-hmm.
because somehow or the other we passed our family heritage on to them, even just by being around them.
Yes. Yes. The children and the elders. I say that all the time. It's so important to connect with the children and connect with the elders.
Right, we do. Otherwise, we're going to be missing a lot.
Yes. That's where so many of the lessons are.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think as families now, our children have gotten so much into technology that they don't even relate to even other children as much as
Mm.
we used.
Mm-hmm.
Other children, when we were children, other children were our life. The greatest thing was go outside and play dodgeball and play jacks and hopscotch. Who does
Mm-hmm.
those things today?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
They've got some kind of device in their hand, and even the babies want one to play with.
The babies know how to do it.
They
They
do,
know more than me.
they do, because they've had it always.
Right. 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 Right.
Well, I've enjoyed today,
Me too.
Samantha.
This
And
was
if there's, we need to get together again. Maybe one day after all this confusion is over, we'll go out for lunch or something together
okay.
because
We
I like
definitely
spending time with you.
Yes, we definitely will. Thank you so much, Aunt Myrtle.
Thank you, dear. It's been a pleasure.